Hi guys, today we will talk about system design interview and how to approach any of them. And we'll mostly focus on answering the question why we're doing some of the sections and what actually all those sections look like. And so the typical flow that you've probably seen, if not, this is the typical flow that you can expect from the interviewers to look for. So gathering some requirements, maybe doing some simple data modeling. This is of course optional, and designing some API and interfaces, starting with some high-level design, and of course later going into the deep dive. And in the end, if you have time, you can move to kind of ensuring that you've fulfilled all of the requirements, kind of making sure you have common understanding with your interviewer. And so this is the typical flow. And the main question, the main things that we are going to focus on is, of course, every of those sections, but mainly why we're doing it. So as soon as you understand the why, then you'll know, okay, this is the main reason that we're doing. We need to do it before another section so that it clarifies some of that. It helps us. So let's start. So first of all, with the requirements, we have, of course, the functional and non-functional ones. To give you a simple and short overview of the differences between them, so the functional, of course, those are the main features of your system, and kind of the typical user story, user needs that you can see probably in your work. And just to give you an example, we'll walk through kind of the Facebook part. So as an example of such a functional requirement, so users should be able to see posts created by others, right? So you have your friends in Facebook, and then you should be able to see those posts. And of course, we are trying to show the newest on top. And when it comes to the non-functional ones, so we are not asking about the features, we are asking about the how. So how well should we do some features? How our system should work? And mainly here we are concerned about some latency, availability, consistency. Those are the basic things that you can talk about here. There are of course many more, but here we are going to talk about kind of an overview. And an example to this functional requirement. So we know that the user should see the newest one on top. But what if there's split millisecond, someone just created something? How fast should we be able to see it? And here, usually there's a question between kind of a trade-off of availability versus consistency. And usually here probably what we would expect that you should always see some posts. If they are not the newest ones, it's fine. It's better for you to see some of the posts than not see any of them. And we can wait for some time. Usually you can try to also agree on some number, for instance, like 30 seconds, 5 minutes, of course, depending on the use case. So those are the things that actually we start with, and the main question, why we're doing it. So let's start with why for the functional requirements. So we are trying to define the system scope. As soon as we have this system scope defined, we understand, okay, what should we focus on? How should we focus on in our entire design? Then of course we need to agree on those core flows. As soon as we have this agreement on the core flows, we are not trying to do any over engineering. And we are ensuring that, okay, this is the parts that we are going to focus on. We don't need to add anything more. Because if you try to design entire Facebook, for instance, during your 45 minutes, 1 hour, maybe 2 hour system design, it will have a lot of features, a lot of functionalities, and it will be just too much. And when it comes to the non-functional requirements, so the main part is that we are trying to choose the right architecture. Interviewers are going to look for whether you're aware of the trade-offs that you are making, for instance, choosing relational database over non-relational database, maybe between making simple API calls or just going into gRPC, or maybe changing it to some message systems in between. And all of those things are basically the trade-offs. And whether you understand and whether you made them cautiously according to any of the requirements that you are given. Because sometimes they might twist it, they might switch the requirement just to understand whether you are going to adapt to what they are providing. And then of course we are trying to build something for reality. If you have very limited amount of time during this interview, and if you have in 1 hour if you have to design in 1 hour entire system for a company that has 10,000 employees, it is going to be too much. And mainly we as engineers, we usually try to over engineer, and usually we try to go into scalability, all those different interesting problems. But sometimes when it's, I don't know, 100 transactions per second, maybe 1000, maybe even a simple database will be enough with one simple service, probably scaled a bit. But it is important to understand both the pros and cons of adding any of the additional complexity. Yeah, so this is about the functional and non-functional requirements. So the next one, of course, if this is this data modeling. So I saw it. So some people are doing it, some people are not. And what I usually suggest is to try to define some basic entities used in the system, so that you have the common understanding with your interviewer. That, for instance, you have a post, you have a user, you have no idea whether it's whether it's going to be stored in the relational database, in the NoSQL database, in the graph database, in the search engine. It doesn't matter, just that you know, okay, we need to have a post somewhere in the system, we need to have a user, we need to have a group, we need to have something. And mainly this is purely for the common understanding. So the most important part during the interview is to have a common understanding with your interviewer, that and showing that you are making your cautious decisions, and you are taking both your knowledge and experience, as well as those requirements and constraints that are being provided to you, to design to design the system, to design the task that you are given. And then usually we go to API and interfaces. So we have basically kind of the names the names of the entities that we need. We see the features, we see what are some important constraints on them, for instance, some availability, latency, etc. So we have all those things, and then of course we need to have some kind of input, some output. So basically the contract. So we need to have the contract for your functionalities, whatever you're going to create. For instance, when it comes to seeing those posts, we need to have an API, right? So for instance, you need to have a simple API to get a post, and to provide some ID, and you need to mention about the headers, about the response, whether maybe if it's some other API calls that you're going to make, what should they consist of, and there are many things here. And the main thing that it helps you here, so why we are doing it actually here, is basically we are confirming the behavior. So as soon as we are going to confirm the behavior, confirm all the inputs and outputs, we can think, okay, so we will need maybe one service, two services, 3 different services. It all helps us to understand what are the inputs into our system as well as the outputs. So we know whether we have all the data or not enough data. And of course, we need to ensure that all functionalities are listed. So if we have 5 different features and those functional requirements provided, those somehow we need to fulfill them. And usually we fulfill them through this API, through some interfaces, through some things that we're doing. And we need to show it, we need to show to the interviewer, okay, so those are all the calls, all the API that is required by us to fulfill all those requirements. And then of course, let's focus on how the requests, how the entire flow will look like. So after we have those inputs, outputs, after we have this understanding, we will probably go into this high-level design. So we are going to have this high-level architecture, and we are basically connecting the components. So we are going to draw some of the rectangles, we are going to connect them together, we are going to put some arrows in different directions, and we are going to ensure that all the flows work, so that we have some data here, we have some data there. And this is one of the examples with many of the comments. So basically, during the high-level design, probably you're just going to have, okay, we have front-end API, we can have API gateway, we can have some order service, for instance, in this example, inventory service, maybe some other services. And here you're just going to connect many different components. We are not going to dive a bit deeper. We are just going to ensure, okay, this is how the request will flow through our system. And this is how we're going to fulfill all those API, all those interfaces that we've designed before, so that we are ensuring that all the functionalities are listed. And of course, the main things, so based on that, as mentioned, we are ensuring all flows are working so that we have the data somewhere stored in the system, we have the services kind of operating that data, ensuring that there is something available there, as well as we are showing which components are needed there and kind of our understanding about the different domains in the system, how they should communicate to each other, whether we should have many different services or just one and go into microservice architecture, or maybe stay in the monolith. So there are many different things that we are going to showcase in this part. And then of course, this is the most important part. So after you draw a couple of the components, we are going to do a deep dive. And then the main things is we dive into each decision separately. And mainly, we are trying to clarify the trade-offs and decisions taken. And to give you an example, let's imagine we have this Facebook like account, right? So I just put it here on the screen so we can of course read it and check it out maybe later. So basically, this is something that you can imagine like saying yourself to the interviewer. So when thinking about the like count, it seems like it will be used a lot for both reads and writes, but it doesn't require strong consistency. And of course, this assumption needs to be confirmed from the interviewer, because then you'll make a different approach. But this is basically how the Facebook right now is probably working. But of course, what is important is that read after write consistency is necessary, because as a user, when you press a like button, probably you will expect, okay, I should see this like there, right? So we will need to somehow provide this read after write consistency. So then you can argue, okay, if those are the constraints that we have, then the data maybe should be returned from the NoSQL database, for instance, MongoDB, etc., etc. And here we should also take into account appropriate partitioning to avoid hotspots for maybe some very popular posts. And the main thing here, the more knowledge, this is the place where you can show the most amount of knowledge and experience that you have. So we can compare different databases, how they work. You can compare, for instance, hotspots, how we're going to design there, for instance, if you're going to dive very deeply into the database side or maybe to the messaging side, this is time for you. This is where you can shine. This is where you are going to showcase your great knowledge, and this is where you can earn a lot of points. And mainly this deep dive as mentioned. So this is the main summary. So you need to provide the details about the trade-offs that you took, even if you took a wrong turn somewhere and maybe assumed some of the features. Here, as soon as you explain, okay, those are the decisions that I took, those are the trade-offs, because I believe maybe some consistency is more important in that situation. This is in those situations, you can still pass the interview as soon as you explain your thinking. This is the system design interview. It's more whether you understand the problem and how you're going to approach it, and of course trying to see whether you thought about all of the different trade-offs. And of course, mainly it shows potential failures. So during the system design interview, probably you need to think, okay, what if data center goes down? What if the database goes down? What if the services goes down? What if something else? So there is a lot of things that might happen, and the more you mention, of course, the better. And of course, assuming you know how to tackle them. So for instance, what if the database goes down? What happens with the data? How fast can we recover? And all those different things will matter for different types of databases, for different types of situations, and for different types of requirements. So some people might say, okay, we are okay with the data being 30 minutes, with not having, let's say, last 30 minutes of data. Or some of them, for the transaction system, for instance, you need extreme consistency. You need all the details. You need all of the information there. So there's a lot of different cases, and this is where you shine. So as soon as you can show all those potential failures, as soon as you express them, you start talking about some of them, you dive extremely deeply into them, you can be certain that the interviewer will see that, and it will grant you very good points. And then after you do the deep dive, sometimes you can go to these requirements fulfilling, sometimes not, sometimes it's even not necessary. Basically, this is a place where you're kind of walking through kind of entire task, your entire interview, and you're ensuring that all requirements are fulfilled. So you of course start with functional ones, then non-functional, then you mention what trade-offs. So basically kind of like a very short, very brief summary. So just for this example, for the light count, so you can mention, okay, we fulfilled this requirement. This is the API that we have. We took into account the scale and some potential issues, and to secure the functionality so that we are upholding to these Facebook standards. And just to give like a summary of what you did, and to ensure that you have this common understanding with your interviewer. And it also ensures you, oh, maybe you forgot about something, or maybe you did not. And if you realize that you forgot about maybe one functional requirement or one non-functional requirement, this is the place where maybe you can still mention, okay, if there's the speed for it needed, and maybe some search capabilities, we need some search engine, and then just to briefly kind of try to still provide some of the information. Yet many of those things will probably also be mentioned about your interviewer, because they usually have need to understand all of your thoughts on many different areas, like for instance going more into APIs and connections, then going of course into the database and different types of databases. So there's a lot of things that the interviewers might ask and might point you to. It's very important to understand that they are trying to help you. So they are trying to help you to guide you into some separate direction. If you decided, okay, they are going, maybe they suggested some idea, but you believe this is wrong, it's very important to explain your thoughts, explain your thinking, and that provide your details of how you are making some decisions. So this is it. This is a short kind of summary of mainly what is the typical flow, why are we doing it actually in that order, because every before step kind of unlocks you, gives you a bit more details to the next one. And yeah, so this is a short description. So thank you, and let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.